Q1 session. He's just ended a dismal FP2 down in 18th place, 1.1 seconds adrift of his factory Ducati teammate Marc Marquez, who was fastest in that 13-minute session. With that quartet go Brad Binder on the factory KTM. He's not taken to this Balaton Park circuit as fast as other KTM stars like Pedro Acosta and Enea Bastianini. Those two safely through to Q2. Ayagura, Miller Oliveira, Fernandez, Zarco and Rins also in this Q1 session. Well, it has just been a very sorry start to Sprint Saturday for Bagnaia, who at the moment just simply has no answers to some big questions. Just has no confidence and unfortunately no pace on the factory Ducati. 18th he's just finished FP2 after finishing 14th yesterday. Lewis, he spoke to the media and he wasn't exactly sounding bullish. He wasn't exactly sounding confident about his chance of getting into this second qualifying session. Difficult to see how he can get through when you look at some of the names around him and the pace he's shown throughout this weekend. It just has not been on the money.
I'd be surprised at this stage if Bagnaia does go through, but one thing we have learned over a MotoGP career, which has already seen him win 2 World Championships, is that you do not write off Pecco Bagnaia. He is such a class act, although of course he's not the only MotoGP World Champion in this session. The reigning champion Jorge Martin in this session, although he wasn't too disappointed to miss out by a single thousandth of a second to Fabio Quartararo in practice yesterday. Jorge Martin is on his own journey with Aprilia, still very much in the early stages of it, so he will fancy his chances. So too will Marco Bezzecchi. We've got both of the Ducati GP25s not ridden by Marc Marquez in this Q1 session. Gian Antonio's in there too. So many names who shouldn't be in this Q1 session, but only 2 will get out of it.
And of course we always emphasise the importance of the Q1 sessions, the importance of qualifying and how important it is to get yourself inside that top 6. Well, that feels more prevalent than ever here at the Balaton Park circuit. All the riders yesterday saying it is incredibly hard to overtake around this compact, just over 4 kilometre layout. It's one line in so many sections, particularly through the chicanes running through turns 9 and 10, 12, 13, 15 and 16. You've got to be so precise. So a poor qualifying, well, it could set you up for a poor sprint and a poor Grand Prix. So there's a lot riding on this 15-minute Q1 session.
Just trying to nail the perfect lap is much easier said than done. Trying to pick the right braking point, the right line through these quite tight and slow chicanes. A couple of them taken in first gear. It's quite a simple layout, as Marc Marquez said. There aren't many secrets to how to set a fast lap, but because it is in that sort of format, that sort of layout, it means the lap times are always so close. From Quartararo in 10th yesterday in practice, just a tenth of a second back to Bagnaia, who was in 14th place, and another couple of tenths back to Miguel Oliveira, who was down in P18. So missing your braking marker by half a metre or a metre, you miss one apex in one of these chicanes by half a metre, it's going to ruin the second part of that chicane. Small mistakes will pay you heavily in this qualifying session.
You don't have to go too far back in MotoGP history. Mentioning the names of Martin, Bezzecchi and Bagnaia, you could be talking about a battle for the victory, a battle for the podium. Right now, though, here in Balaton, it's a battle just to get out of Q1. Who will emerge from what is always an incredibly difficult 15-minute session? Marco Bezzecchi has not qualified lower than 5th in the last 4 Grand Prix on that factory Aprilia. We thought his time attack woes, he'd rid those of late, but he said yesterday he was finding it hard in the hard braking zones to get that RSGP stopped. I just feel if Bez is to have any hope of making 4 podiums in the last 5 Grand Prix, has to get through this Q1.
Well, the last 2 pole sitters in MotoGP have both come from qualifying 1. Pecco Bagnaia himself back in Brno and Marco Bezzecchi a week ago in Austria. So you just never know. Get through this session and it can completely transform your weekend. You can go from talking about starting on the back row of the grid to starting on the front row. Marc Marquez and Fabio Quartararo, 2 world champions, watch on as 2 very recent, in fact our last 2 MotoGP world champions buy their ticket in the Q1 lottery.
Quartararo probably still relieved, can't believe his lovely crept into Q2 by a thousandth of a second. Martin versus Bagnaia. How many times have we seen these two go elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder in 2022, 2023 and 2024? It's a different ball game for both. Though right now, isn't it, in 2025 for completely contrasting circumstances. Can Bagnaia somehow dig himself out of what is a huge hole he's dug for himself here this weekend in Hungary? This tight layout, technical layout, just does not suit his style, or certainly, unfortunately, exposes all of his weaknesses that have come with that lack of front-end feeling, the lack of stopping performance on the Ducati, struggling to get it stopped. Park circuit. It is Marco Bezzecchi on the factory Aprilia. Front rows in Sachsenring and pole position last time out in Spielberg. He's found his qualifying touch of late. Has the 26-year-old Italian. And of course, it's worth noting the last time MotoGP visited a new track, the Grand Prix of India in 2023, well, Bez ran riot. He was utterly dominant, taking the victory by over 8 seconds on that occasion from pole position. It would be some achievement if, in the space of 7 days, he comes through Q1 and takes pole for Bez. So Marc Marquez, Alex likewise, eager, keen to get on with business here in Q2. We're about to find out, ladies and gentlemen, who is going to be our first MotoGP pole starter here in Hungary in 33 years.
Marc Marquez has some company. Up behind him is his brother Alex. Then it's Fabio Di Gianantonio, who came through qualifying 1. And then up behind them it's the super sub, Paul Espargaro. Pecco Bagnaia, unfortunately, is a spectator with us as he watches the 12 fastest riders around Balaton Park battling it out for pole position. It feels like a head-to-head between Marc Marquez and Pedro Acosta, but plenty of others could still muscle in on that front row battle.
Marquez eager to get clear track ahead of him on this opening salvo here in Hungary. There is Alex, the company directly behind him. Big session, a very big session this for Alex, with that 3-place grip penalty looming large in tomorrow's main Grand Prix. 26 laps, it will be full distance here, 2 p.m. local time, lights out. We know you're going to want to join us to see how the riders tackle the new Balaton Park circuit for the first time. Paul Espargaro, brilliant yesterday, brilliant, 8th fastest, replacing Maverick Vinales. Lots of talk last night that maybe contemplating a return to full-time racing over in the World Superbike paddock. We'll be keeping close tabs on how that story develops, but in the present and more pressing matters right now for Paul, he's trying to get good grip position for the Sprintman Grand Prix here in Hungary. Marquez then leads this quartet out of the final corner, head down. This is now time attacks underway here in Hungary.
When you look at the spread of which bikes are in this Q2 session, it gives you a pretty good idea of which bikes work best around this Balaton Park circuit. We have just 1 Yamaha in this session, just 1 Aprilia, and of course that was Marco Bezzecchi who came through. We do have 2 Hondas in this session, the 2 factory Hondas, Durango and Luca Marini, but we have 3 KTMs and 5 Ducatis.
Something's happened to Alex Marquez here because he's not behind his brother Marc. Yeah, Alex has dropped behind both Di Gianantonio and Paul Espargaro. I don't know whether he ran wide going through turn 2 or whether it was something happened to him in the first sector, because he was right on the rear tyre of Marc, but he has slipped now behind the DR46 Ducati and the KTM in the hands of Paul Espargaro. Marquez and Acosta's names pop up on the bottom of the screen. Oh, we've got a faller. We have got a faller. It's in sector 2. Clearly, it's not our world champion leader, Marc Marquez. So who has gone down? Pedro Acosta. And now this is a big moment early on in this Q2 session, because Pedro Acosta has been one of the stars of the show so far here in this Grand Prix of Hungary. He goes into full Olympic sprinter mode, doesn't he? Trying to get back to the pit lane quickly. He has gone down heavy into turn 8. Oh, look at that KTM, that factory KTM. That's a write-off. That's completely destroyed. Costa looks okay. He has been rapid here in Hungary, but that is his second big crash of the weekend.
Well, there's talk about how slow this circuit is, but that's about as fast a crash as you can have around this Balaton Park circuit. It almost took out our cameraman at the tower on the outside of turn 8. Marc Marquez, oblivious to all of that, has pumped in a 1:36.822, roughly in line with what Bezzecchi did in Q1.
Yeah, just 200ths outside of Bez's benchmark in that Q1 session. Well, that could be really damaging, couldn't it, for Acosta? He hasn't been outside the top 3 in any session so far this weekend. He's looked like the biggest challenger for Marc. This lap, though, is clearly going to go. Marc realises that as he's on the wrong side of the curve there in that second sector, so he aborts this lap. That cancelled, as you can see. But the big moment, Pedro Acosta, a real high-speed front-end washout going through turn 8. Lunch has been cancelled on his side of the factory KTM garage. That's a massive rebuild for his crew to get him 2 bikes ready for this afternoon sprint But that's a huge dent. You felt like Acosta was going to be a serious, big contender for pole here this morning.
Well, I said earlier on, Pedro Acosta has on occasions dropped the ball in qualifying. Of course, he overrode his KTM last weekend and had to start 7th when it felt like he had the potential to be higher up the grid than that. Crashed in qualifying in Jerez too when he looked a possible contender for the front 2 rows of the grid. It's in this session where the ultra-talented Pedro Acosta has fallen short in 2025, and he has put so much pressure now on his second one with the only remaining KTM in one piece. He's not got a lap time to his name yet.
So, at the moment, provisional pole going to Marc Marquez on the factory Ducati. He's the only rider on that opening burst that found a 1:36. Fabio Di Giannantonio looking to, Bezzecchi gets the Aprilia all out of shape. And he now goes through the gravel trap. This is in the final sector. Marco Bezzecchi, that was going to be his first registered time of this afternoon's Q2 session. Morbidelli then fires the VR46 Ducati onto the front row. 2 Portimao Enduro bikes that now on that front row, second and third respectively. Yeah, Pedro Acosta's seconded a scooter, and now it's just trying to regain the composure, get the heart rate down, get on that spare bike and see if he can still be in this fight for pole position. There's no doubt about it, he's got the speed, just pushing that little bit too aggressively before maybe those tyres have got up to optimal working temperature. We're going to find out, aren't we, in the final 9 minutes or so, just how costly that big get-off at turn 8 could be as far as the cost is concerned.
What he hasn't got is the time for 2 runs anymore in this session. He's going to have to just do it on that second bike with 1 more tyre. Aldeguer now up onto the front row of the grid in second place. He's living up to his potential.
Yeah, Fermin Aldeguer really is. He always said pre-weekend in the press conference here on Thursday, this could be a big golden opportunity to win as a rookie in MotoGP. When you come here, blank canvas, level playing field, and with so many riders with such relative lack of experience around this Balaton Park circuit. Mark's pushing. He really is pushing the envelope on that factory Ducati, isn't he? Just 1 corner left on this current lap for Mark. This could be the best time we've ever seen here in Balaton Park. 1:36.6, it is indeed. Brilliant by Mark. That's a new all-time lap record here. Couple of tenths inside Bez's benchmark in Q1.
Bastianini into the 36s on the KTM, so while one KTM's in several pieces down at turn 8, Bastianini goes onto the front row of the grid on the 23 KTM. Mir is also on the front row now. Joan Mir's done a 37.2, so it's Ducati, KTM, Honda on your front row of the grid as it stands.
Now that would be a massive, monumental shock if Mir was on the front row of the grid. He's only qualified previously twice on the front row. His last front row start was 3 years ago at Portimao back in 2022. This was where, look, chatter. Look at that front end chattering underneath Pedro Acosta. That's at the point now where he knows this is going to hurt. Damaging for his pole chances. Damaging certainly for Red Bull KTM's crash budget, because that bike was destroyed as he went barrel rolling through the gravel trap. Acosta, that's a relatively, thankfully for his sake, a fast one, albeit a rather gentle slide on his backside. He didn't get picked up by the gravel and started barrel rolling through. Of course, he'll be a little bit beaten up, a little bit battered and bruised after his vicious hop throttle high side of turn 2 yesterday. He's back out though on his second KTM RC16. This would be some rescue, wouldn't it? If Acosta would get himself anywhere near pole and on the front row, it would just show his pace and potential, which we know he's had all weekend so far.
So at the moment we've got Marc Marquez, Bastianini and Joan Mir on the front row, Aldeguer, Morbidelli, Marini on row 2, so we've got factory Honda's 3rd and 6th. Giannantonio's now 7th ahead of Quartararo and Pol Espargaro. And the other rider who's under big pressure here is Alex Marquez. We talked about the pressure that he was under at the start of the session, and of course we saw that he didn't get his first run right. Of course, yellow flags didn't help, but Alex Marquez is 10th. That, of course, for the Grand Prix tomorrow would become 13th on the grid if Alex Marquez doesn't lift himself up from there.
Yeah, and around a tight and technical circuit like Balaton, 13th on the grid, one line in so many parts of the layout, hard to overtake. You have not got a prayer getting through from 13th place on the grid. So yeah, big 6 minutes coming up as far as the number 73 is concerned. Marco Bezzecchi, having come through brilliantly from Q1, has still to register a lap time in this session. He was on a good lap when we saw him make a mistake into one of the chicanes. A mistake that's so easy to make around this Balaton complex. He's got it wrong again. Yesterday, this was his issue. He said yesterday he just cannot get the RSGP pulled up on the brakes in the hard braking zones. Turn 1, turn 5, into 9, the chicane, on the entry of the chicane through 12 and 15. Doesn't look like, unfortunately, as far as Bez is concerned in this Q2 session, that they've been able to completely give him that front confidence he so desperately needs.
He's in the same boat as Acosta at the moment, with no lap time next to his name for slightly different reasons, but this doesn't look like a Pedro Acosta who's leaving a little bit of margin there to get a lap time on the board. No banker lap next to his name, but Pedro Acosta is going to lay it all on the line here to try and put this KTM on pole.
Yes, that's 6 career pole positions as Acosta in 88 Grand Prix starts, just the one previously in MotoGP. Just building up some confidence, trying to find his rhythm once again. That high-speed spill at turn 8. That will have certainly just put a little bit of a niggling doubt at the back of his mind. I think if he's able to find anything inside the top 5 here, this would be a brilliant job by Acosta, considering what happened to him right at the start of this session. Gian Antonio is just directly behind the Spaniard on circuit. Digia, who came through Q1 in 2nd place, he's looking to push himself back up on those first 2 rows. 7th at the moment, estimated P6.
Marquez has got 3/10 over Bastianini, but there's a 6/10 gap to potentially slot yourself into to put yourself on the front row of the grid. Mir on a 37.2. That lap time is very much beatable for several riders out there on track, and Gian Antonio might not be too far away from that himself, depending on how his final sector goes. So this is the first representative lap time really for Pedro Acosta. It's going to put him somewhere, I guess, on the 3rd row of the grid. In fact, it's 4th row, 10th. Gian Antonio, though, does go onto the front row. He does squeeze ahead of Mir by less than a 10th.
Just used Acosta there as the perfect reference. Just 50 metres, he sat back of the Spaniard and just ran his markers, ran his lines, and 3rd fastest goes to Gian Antonio. Surely he can't. Surely he can't, can he? Having come through Q1 last weekend in Spielberg to fire the Factory Aprilia onto pole position, he's hoping lightning strikes twice here in Lake Balaton, isn't he? And Marco Bezzecchi, at the moment, this lap, what a second sector that was from Bez. No problem stopping the Aprilia so far on this current lap. He's about to tick through sector 3 now. Let's see how he's getting on. Oh, it's going to be tight. It's going to be close. Surely if he carries this lap on through, he's going to be firing himself onto the front row of the grid, potentially 4th. Let's see how he gets on now. 3/4 of the way through the final sector, through turn 17, full lean angle on the Factory Aprilia, through that final corner, hard on the gas, up into 2nd, a 1:36.808. That's 8,000 per second slower than what he managed to get through Q1, but he'll be relieved at the moment. 2nd for Bez, behind Mark in pole.
Just goes to show you only need to string 1 clean lap together to get yourself on the front row. Finally, Marco Bezzecchi has done that. Acosta's now starting to build up speed. This could put him on the 2nd row of the grid. Gian Antonio is now launching an attack at Marc Marquez. Of course, he also came through Q1.
5th place as it stands right now as well for Joan Mir. He was 5th on the grid in Brno as we resumed action after the summer break. Gian Antonio finds another high 1:36, a 1:36.872, still in that 3rd place. He needs to do some favours back to Pedro Acosta at the moment. Does Digit 5th place for Quartararo. Wow, just wow. How on earth is Fabio Quartararo finding low 1:37s on that factory Yamaha? That bike has no right to be where it is. It's the genius talent of Quartararo that's put that machine up into 6th place. 5th place briefly, now he's back in 6th.
Well, Marc Marquez won't be improving on his 36.6 on this lap. You saw him there rolling off into turn 5. Luca Marini's just improved into 8, so it's 8th and 9th now for the factory Hondas. Alex Marquez has just gone over the line and done a 37.2. He's still nailed down in 10th.
Quartararo 6/10 faster than what he managed yesterday. Where would Yamaha be without the Frenchman at the moment? Luca Marini is in 8th place. Gian Antonio still a locked-on for the rear tyre of Acosta's just set the best second sector of the session, although, as you can see...
Well, the yellows.
Yeah, I was going to say, it says lap cancel for a yellow flag. I think that might be an incorrect graphic. We'll keep close tabs on what's going on right now with Didier. Aldeguer has just pushed himself up into 8th place, and we expected a little bit more from Aldeguer, and that's his session over. With a minute remaining, he goes in hot into the first corner, so at best, Aldeguer, who was superb in the last stages in Spielberg last time out, to charge his way through the second. At best, he'll be 8th on the grid, middle of row 3.
I think it was a shortcut for Gian Antonio and Acosta. They both ran off on this lap. I think they might just get round for one more lap. They certainly need it. So does Alex Marquez, who's currently down in 11th place. This is a crucial final 30 seconds or so for the 73.
Oh, he was out the seat. He was out the seat there. That's going to cost him time. Going to cost him a lot of time. I mean, 11th on the rankings, 14th he'll be on the grid for the Grand Prix tomorrow with that 3 grid place penalty. 0.093 is the 93 up on his own best time. Alex Marquez, wow. Well, he's got over the line for one more lap, but is it curtains as far as the 73 is concerned? He could be 14th on the grid tomorrow.
Yeah, right next to Pecco Bagnaia on the grid as it stands for tomorrow's Grand Prix. Yellow flags are back out in the second sector, which is the sector Marc Marquez is just completing. He's on the verge of extending his advantage. He might not need to.
Oh, it's Paul Espargaro. It's been a damaging session this as far as KTM are concerned. Pedro Acosta already down hard in the gravel at turn 8, and now Paul Espargaro's on the deck as well. So he's 12th fastest in this session.
And Acosta's now hitting those yellows in the second sector. So Pedro Acosta, he will not be starting from the front row of the grid. That run in 2025 is going to continue. That is another dropping of the ball, I'm afraid, from an Acosta point of view. Of course, with the crash early on, way too far back to challenge Marc Marquez. Surely from there, 7th on the grid.
Bezzecchi and Marini, they're the only 2 that have taken the checker flag so far in this session. Over the line, Marc Marquez goes, and of course it is. Of course, it's another fastest lap. Round of applause from team boss Davide Tardozzi. A 1:36.518, by far the fastest time we've seen of this opening weekend here in Balaton Park. Alex Marquez can forget it. Alex Marquez is going to be deep on the grid for tomorrow's main Grand Prix. Well, deep on the grid for the sprint this afternoon. 11th quickest for Alex. He'll keep that place because the only rider behind him in this Q2 session is Paul Espargaro, who's on the floor crashing out of contention. But 14th on the grid, Alex will find himself in the Grand Prix tomorrow. Joan Mir. At one stage, Mir was on the middle of the second row in 5th place. Nothing going on his final flying lap. Mir will be starting in 10th spot. Out-qualified, not to what we've said this so far this season, by his factory Honda teammate Luca Marini. Top job that by Marini. He'll be starting in 9th. There's going to be a couple of real frustrated Spaniards at the end of that session. Acosta 7th. He always feared the worst when he was down heavy early on at turn 8. 7th for a rider who's been the closest rival really throughout this weekend to Marc. And Fermin Aldeguer, well, we know he's got stunning late race pace. He's going to need it once again as he finds himself one place behind Acosta in 8th. Acosta and Aldeguer, they've already had a few skirmishes this season. They start alongside each other on the grid. Well, Alex Marquez, slow on line during practice yesterday, got him slapped with a 3-place grid penalty, so he always felt like he was a bit of a damage limitation Q2 as far as Alex is concerned. Well, he wasn't able to limit that damage. He is going to be 11th on the grid for the sprint, 14th on the grid for the main Grand Prix, around one of the hardest tracks on the calendar to make moves and make passes. So yeah, he's dug himself a pretty deep hole for the remainder of the weekend. As Alex, no stopping though, Marc Marquez setting himself up perfectly for an attack on a 7th successive double victory. That's pole position number 102, 74 in MotoGP. He has taken to the Balaton Park circuit like a duck to water, hasn't he? Fabio Di Gianantonio, though, on the front row, having coming out of Q1. Let's get the thoughts of his boss, Pablo Nieto. Who's with Jack?
Yeah, brilliant job from Fabio Pablo. He looked pretty lost yesterday. We're seeing the 2 guys that came through from Q1 in 2nd and 3rd. Obviously, at a brand new circuit, how important do you think that extra track time was?
Yeah, always is very important not to make more laps, but it's true that also Dilla, the Friday morning was very fast. We lost the way a little bit in the P2, so that's why we didn't enter to the Q2 directly, but I think also this morning was very also with Franco, we make a very good job.
Great job, well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, both VR46 bikes inside the top 5. Digi a third, Morbidelli in 5th place. Cracking job by Bez and Di Gianantonio. Of course, they came through Q1 and then have really capitalised on those moves in an opening session to get themselves on the front row of the grid. Just the 4th front row as MotoGP career for Fabio Di Gianantonio. The 2nd of the season when he started 2nd at the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. A big case of what might have been as far as Acosta is concerned. Surely without that big mistake he made early on at turn 8, he would have been figuring probably in that battle for the front row and maybe even for pole position. But once again, it's when he extends his record of MotoGP poles. Marc Marquez just untouchable, almost 3/10 of a second clear of Marco Bezzecchi. Looks like we're going to get another showdown between Marc and Bez, which has been a story of our last few Grand Prix. Of course, they went battling together at the front in Assen. They were close competitors in the sprint in the Sachsenring and in the Grand Prix before Bez jumped off and went 2nd. And they also fought close, didn't they, both in Brno and in Spielberg. 7th was not what he came for, Lewis, in that Q2. Nowhere near what he came for.
And you worry when he does get to the front of the field, if he does get there at any stage this afternoon or tomorrow, whether Marc Marquez might be long gone over the horizon by the time Acosta gets there. He's, I'm afraid, dropped the ball in qualifying once again. We thought today was his best shot of ending that long run for a front row start in 2025. He did not do it, and KTM, well, their best hope now might well be Enea Bastianini. He's another of the big stars of qualifying today. Bastianini 4th. Shout out to for Quartararo in 6th. A few riders really did stand up in that qualifying session as some others slipped up.
Yeah, mere kicking himself, Will Acosta. When you look at Marc Marquez pole position, he shaved half a second off his best time yesterday. Bezzecchi was super rapid, a lot quicker than he managed yesterday by 0.8 of a second. Acosta's time yesterday that led practice, a 1:37.061, actually faster than what he has just managed in that Q2 session. So without the troubles, without the dramas, you've got to be thinking that Acosta was going to be at least 3/4 faster. When you look at the jumps that the likes of the front row made compared to their times yesterday, he would have been in that hunt for pole. He would have been challenging for Marc on pole position. So yeah, big mistake as far as Acosta is concerned. Speaking of mistakes that are going to hurt your weekend, well, Alex Marquez will be ruining what happened at the end of practice yesterday, because he's going to be 11th on the grid for the sprint, 14th for the Grand Prix. Fabio Di Gianantonio, though, brilliant. He just about crept into Q2 by the skin of his teeth, and he's on the front row for just the 4th time in MotoGP. He's the Jack.
Well, Fabio, I don't know what you had for breakfast this morning, but it clearly worked. Through into Q2 by the smallest margin possible, and now onto the front row as well. What a magnificent turnaround. How did you pull it off?
Yeah, well, yesterday, as I said, I was pretty frustrated about how we started the weekend, because now I think we have enough experience to understand what we need in these kind of conditions, that in tracks where there are a lot of grip. So yeah, we did a massive work yesterday with the team. We reunited, we regrouped, and yeah, actually we stayed in the garage till night, and yeah, we took some ideas. We tried it this morning, and they worked, and luckily it worked also on the qualifying lap. So I'm happy.
Great job, well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome job through Q1, and then on the front row, bit of a helping hand. He got a good reference for a couple of his best laps behind Pedro Acosta, but you have still got to get the job done, and he did it. First front row since Austin, only his 4th front row start in 71 MotoGP appearances, so not a frequent front row starter as our Digia, but he's there, only 600ths back of Bezzecchi in 2nd place, and that is a good job, because as Jack mentioned, he was only 13th fastest yesterday. And he talked about his struggles this year in high grip circuits to find anything out of a soft rear tyre. And Enea Bastianini then is going to be our top KTM starter in the sprint and the Grand Prix. Brilliant by the beast. Oh, how close is he to the front row? Just 700ths behind his fellow Italian Fabio Di Gianantonio. That's a great job by the beast. Brilliant. 4th, he will start then on the grid. Marco Bezzecchi, and he likes to make life difficult for himself, doesn't he? In Q1 for the second week in a row, but on the front row now for the second week in a row, and he's talking to Jack.
Marco, I'm starting to read a similar story to last weekend. Struggles on Friday, through Q1, now onto the front row of the grid. Another great turnaround. How much is that, once again, down to the hard work of yourself and the team last night?
Yeah, we had to work really hard from yesterday to today. Also this morning I wasn't really feeling in the best way, but I decided to stop working on the bike. I tried to adapt, and was the key, I think, because I started to ride better with more calm, and the modification that we did from yesterday to today's morning was just slightly better, but was enough for me to getting used to the bike. And already in Q1 I felt good, and I knew I could be fast. Honestly, I didn't expect the first row, but at the end when I was there, I fight and I achieved this second position. That is very important.
Good luck this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah, great job that by Marco Bezzecchi. Once again, he and the factory Aprilia team turn around their fortunes after a pretty fraught Friday, just as it was in the Grand Prix of Austria last weekend. There's now 3 front rows in the last 4 Grand Prix for Bez. Third, he started in the Sachsenring pole last time out in Austria. This time around, it is second here in the Grand Prix of Hungary. Hunting, though, a 7th successive gold medal in this afternoon's sprint will be 32-year-old Spaniard Marc Marquez. That is MotoGP pole position number 74. Brilliant here in Balaton Park, and he's talking to Jack.
Paul, once again, Mark, another magnificent job, but are you slightly surprised to see who's joining you on the front row? Both Marco and Digi doing a great job coming through from Q1. Certainly not what we're expecting after the performances of some guys yesterday.
Yes, I mean, it's a surprise, and in the same time, no, because we cannot forget that we're in a new circuit, and every time you put new tire, you find new limits. So they were coming from QP1, sorry, and yeah, the fact that they did already 2 time attacks, they had another reference, so they were super fast, but we did our job. So happy to start in the front row, and especially in pole position.
Excellent job, well done.
Thank you.
Another classy performance from the World Championship leader, who already so far has had so many spectacular sprint Saturdays. Poles in Thailand, Termas, Kota, Qatar, Aragon, Mugello, Germany, and now here in our first visit to Hungary in over 3 decades. Can he make it? 13 sprint wins out of 14 so far this season. 156 sprint points have been on the table this year. Mark has taken 153. Fair to say he's been enjoying life on sprint Saturdays so far this year. He's bid to be victorious in 7 successive sprints and 7 successive Grand Prix. He's already on his 2nd best winning streak of his Grand Prix career. Will start from pole position. The challenge, somewhat surprisingly, some will say, will come from 2 Italians, Fabio Di Gianantonio and Marco Bezzecchi. Brilliant performance by those 2 this morning, having come through Q1. Bez 2nd, Digi 3rd. What a great morning, though, for all of our Italian contingent here in Hungary. Pecco Bagnaia qualifying in 15th place, although that will chop and change. Certainly Jack Miller will drop behind him on the grid tomorrow. And with Alex Marquez's 3rd-place grid penalty, Pecco will be pushed up to 13th on the grid for tomorrow's main Grand Prix. Still, a real tough weekend for Bagnaia, but it's Marc Marquez on pole here in Balaton.
Marc Marquez on pole, and well, going through Q1, maybe that's not a disadvantage. Bezzecchi and Di Gianantonio both from Q1 to the front row, and Ea Bastianini, his best KTM qualifying in 4th, Frankie Morbidelli 5th, from Fabio Quartararo a stunning 6th. Acosta and Aldeguer will both surely be disappointed with 7th and 8th, ahead of the 2 factory Hondas of Luca Marini and Joan Mir. Alex Marquez 11th, Jack Miller 14th. Remember, both dropped 3 places for tomorrow's Grand Prix. They will start there though for the sprint. But tomorrow's grid will promote Pol Espargaro, Brad Binder and Pecco Bagnaia up 2 places respectively. Ralph Fernandez, Jorge Martin 17th from Zarco Oliveira, Alex Rins and Ayagura will start at the back of the field after qualifying down in 21st. BMW M Award then, Marc Marquez is now 79 clear of Alex Marquez, who could only qualify 11th. Fabio Quartararo now jumps up ahead of Pecco Bagnaia into 3rd.
Too long, will it, into the distant future? Well, Marc Marquez will be getting his hands on the keys to a nice, shiny new BMW M. Just as he is in the MotoGP World Championship in the BMW M Award contest, he is being utterly dominant. 12 sprint wins already so far this year, and his quest for sprint win number 13 will get underway from pole position. The 93 doing the business here in Balaton. Marc Marquez, our first pole qualifier in Hungary in 33 years.
Welcome to the most exciting sport on earth. The world's most fearless riders, the fastest bikes, the most forward-thinking manufacturers. This is the hunt, and there can only be one winner. We ride to the edge of possibility. Our riders and machines are always first on the throttle, last on the brakes. The riders, athletes with hunter mentality, at the peak of physical fitness, talent and skill, and always calculating their next move. The manufacturers, creators of the most advanced bikes on the planet, capable of speeds above 360 kilometers per hour, purpose-built for MotoGP with pioneering engineering, creating blistering acceleration, ultimate precision and absolute performance. Unrideable to mere mortals, tamed only by our riders. We ride to the edge of your seat with more overtakes,